So my name is Kristi, and my son's name is Colby. He's going to be 6 years old. He started going through withdrawals about, he started his first steroid cream at 1 month old, and we stopped using them at 3 months. He still has some residual withdrawals, but he's, I would say 90% healed after 2 years. It was really mild. It started off as a really small patch on his ear, and I was a new mom, so I didn't know what to expect. So every little thing was concerning, and I mentioned it to the doctor, and then that was when we were first given steroids. Well, it escalated because, initially when we used the cream, it worked like, it was like magic. We put it on and then it disappeared overnight. I mean, he looked like perfect, and then we would stop the cream and then it would come back and it would be worse. And it just really escalated very quickly from there, over the course of 2 months. It was very like a rebound. We would use the cream and then we would taper off and stop. And I would let the doctor know, hey, the cream worked. And then she would say, okay, good, you can stop using it. And we would stop, and then eventually would come back and it would spread to a new area. So it went from his ear, then to his mouth, and then I asked, is it okay to use it there? And she said yes, but use it sparingly, and we did. And then to his neck, and just we kind of chased that eczema all the way down till his entire body was covered. Well, when the doctor when we first started talking about steroids, I said, well, actually, I brought it up. I said, he's got this like eczema, so I got some like hydrocortisone from the store, but I wasn't sure if it's okay to use it. And she kind of said there was like some hesitancy, like, oh, well, we try to go just see how it goes first before we use that. And so that always stuck in the back of my mind. And then, but eventually she did say we could use, and she gave us a prescription. And so we used it. And then as it started to get worse, I remembered that hesitancy that she had. And so it made me kind of think about it. And I started looking online, like, for different things. And I can't remember. I must have come across a blog or eczema. I can't remember which one came first. And I started to read through things, and all the symptoms and photos were one of the first things that I saw that looked like our son. Yeah. It's been it's been hard. We haven't had to talk about this in a long time. He's better, so, but like just accessing it is difficult. I mean, I was a new mom, like I never knew what it was, transitioning to being a mom for the first time. That in itself is like life altering. So that was really difficult. And I was trying to navigate this new situation, and it was just spiraling out of control. I didn't know what to do or who to ask. And it was really scary having to make those like critical life choices. You have somebody's life hanging in the balance in your hands, and my gut was telling me one thing, but doctors were telling me something else. And it was really, really hard to make that call and go against everything, the professionals, the people that are, supposed to know best. And it was so scary, to, he stopped gaining weight, and it was just terrifying to know that you have the choice to make the call on what happens to your child. Yeah, I mean, that's a really heavy burden to bear. Yeah. A lot of the photos and videos that I have, that was actually towards the end when I kind of felt like, oh, I know what we're dealing with here, and I was trying to document it for myself so I could track his progress and, see what was going on. But in the thick of it, and those videos are really bad to begin with, but in some of the worst moments, I don't have any video of that. Like, you're not thinking I'm going to stop everything and try to take a video of this. It's really life or death survival. Like, you're in the moment. And it's, I remember when he was going through the whole rebound and actually using steroids, it was about maybe 1 month in, and he just woke up in the middle of the night, like screaming. He must have been maybe like 2 or 3 months old, and we're new parents, and you don't know if this is normal, but everything in your body is telling you, like, this is not normal. Something is so wrong. And we had a emergency visit with their doctor, and she set us up with a dermatologist, and that's kind of also where things escalated. But I just remember just those moments where they're inconsolable. it's hard. Yeah. Like, we have very supportive families, so we were lucky that they were able to come in and help us care for Colby. I think without family support, and if you're doing this on your own, it's like, it's that much worse. I tell everyone that if you're going to embark on this journey, that you need all hands on deck. The more people that you can tell that can lend a hand, like, it's not something to do on your own. It's really hard. And they try to understand as much as possible, but it's hard. I think it's hard to understand, especially when you see them suffering so much. A lot of family just wants to jump in and say, "Why aren't you listening to the doctors, right? Why are you trying to go against everything that they're telling you? Look at what it's doing to your child." So there's some conflict there sometimes, and but now he's better, so I think there's no reason to talk about it. But I know at the time everybody's concerned. Yeah. All the time. I mean, I question myself all the time. I mean, I tried to trust the doctors in the beginning, and as much as I had those concerns, I still put my faith and trust. And every single label says, if if you're using it longer than a certain period of time, then ask your doctor. And that's what we would do. We'd question our doctor, and the doctor would say it was fine. And we just continue down that road until I decided to make that choice. But even then, throughout that time, I always questioned myself. I mean, I would be up at 3 a.m. on, Facebook groups and social media, trying to like look for answers and any type of validation that I was doing the right thing. Well, first, none of our doctors ever heard of TSW. And we had a lot of doctors. We had a pediatrician, we had a dermatologist, we had a second dermatologist's opinion, and an allergist. We were seeing doctors on a weekly basis. And, their response was always that either maybe we weren't doing enough, or that it couldn't possibly be the steroids because we haven't been using it long enough. So it was, there was always conflicting advice, and it was hard to know, what to follow. They were also often dismissive, that yes, we understand that's a possibility, but that's definitely not what's going on here. And it was just hard to, I felt unheard, nobody's listening. There weren't any, it was that really brief, but there wasn't any counseling. After going back into our medical records, it said that there was counseling, but there really was no counseling. We had to bring it up and specifically ask, are there any side effects? It's been longer than 2 weeks of use. I'm concerned about side effects. Is this something that we should be worried about? And I specifically remember the dermatologist saying, well, you're not using any oral steroids. It's what I'm giving you is topical. So, there shouldn't be any side effects. If there are, you might see some thinning of the skin, but if it was thinning, you would see it. And that was the extent. I think some people brought it up to me, have you considered, a lawsuit, or why is this kind of thing happening? And so I started to research it and reach out to people just to see what our options were. And there's a statute of limitation, and in Hawaii it's 2 years. So I really didn't want to pursue that route, but I just wanted to get their attention, because I tried. I wrote letters to them. I showed them the ITSEN, information, a whole packet, and I had mailed it and brought it in person. And she looked at it and said, "Yeah, I got it," and handed it back to me. And I was just so concerned that this was being overlooked. So I felt like if we had that legal side with us on our side, that we could get their attention. I was so busy that I really didn't get to pursue it, but somebody emailed me and reminded me that the statute of limitation was coming up. And if we didn't do something, that we'd never get the opportunity again. So I did reach out to other attorneys, and nobody wants to listen to you. It is very, very difficult because most attorneys are paid on a contingency fee. So they don't want to take any cases that are not a slam dunk, because if they're not going to get paid, they're going to be working for free. So a lot of the questions I got from attorneys were for example, so does he have any lasting conditions? Is this something that's permanent? And by that point, he was getting better. And I would say, no, he's better now, Pain and suffering is not what they're looking for. They're looking for something that is, lifelong damages that they can collect on. So the fact that he was better is not necessarily a good thing when it comes to filing a lawsuit. So I did find one attorney that was willing to help me just because he had sympathy for our case. He offered to help if we could get all the records and jump through all of the hoops, and to get a professional, witness. And that in itself is really difficult too. where we live in Hawaii, the medical community is very, very small and tight knit, and you're never going to get somebody to stick their neck out and speak up against anybody else. So, you'd have to find somebody else that was not in the community, and you have to pay for it out of pocket yourself, which could be anywhere between $10,000 to maybe $20,000. And if in the end they say, no, we don't believe you, we don't think you have a case here, then that's it. That's where it ends. So we decided we kind of had been through enough and, didn't want to do that. But what we did do was called a MICP review. And it is a formal mediation process that you have to go through before a formal lawsuit could be filed. And so we did go through that route, and that was very difficult too. That was hard in itself. So the MICP process is a informal mediation process where it's a step that is required by law that you must go through before filing a formal lawsuit. It's sort of the system's way of filtering out non-serious lawsuits. You have to There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through. You have to file certain paperwork, and everybody finally comes to this one date. You are assigned a so-called third-party panel, which includes one doctor and one attorney. And then you talk it out with your doctors and their representatives, which are their attorneys. I went through the process pro se, which means I didn't have an attorney next to me. I just wanted to be heard and to get their attention. But there is a cost to filing it. So there's a fee of, I think, about $450. And there's a lot of time involved to do that and get all your information together. So it definitely does put another roadblock in the process for somebody, in addition to, of course, them being, sick. The statutes of limitation is supposed to be 2 years from the day of what they call discovery, but a lot of people don't really know for sure. There's not even necessarily a diagnosis yet. People don't know. So how do you know when that time starts, when that clock starts? Once you go through the MICP process, that's supposed to put a pause on that statute of limitation. When we finally got the date, we went to an office building, a government building, and we sat across our two doctors, a pediatrician who is really powerful and well known in the community, along with our dermatologists, and they had multiple lawyers sitting across from us. We also had the unbiased panel, and it was really intimidating, extremely intimidating, to be so vulnerable and talk about something so personal. And we did ask, the feeling from the panel from the get-go, they really didn't want to hear our story. They really had no interest. From the very beginning, all they wanted to do was convince us that we had no case, that there was really no reason for us to take this any further and sue these doctors because nobody would take us serious, and that was really the goal. Nobody really wanted to truthfully hear our story. I had a very short list of asks from them, and that was to file an FDA report about the adverse reaction. The other was for them to meet with ITSM so they can learn more about the condition and hopefully change some of the way that they practice. I had a statement that I wanted to read just so that they could understand, the trauma that we experienced. I asked them to put steroids as a adverse reaction drug in his, records. They heard me out about my short list of asks, and they disappeared into another room to discuss. And me and my husband were left in this empty room, to wait. And when they came back, it was just the third party panel. The doctors and the lawyers, they had left, and the panel told us that they were not going to agree to any of those things. And that if we wanted to send our statement to them, that maybe they might read it. And then that was it. Oh, maybe you need a tissue. He slowly started to stop gaining weight. And the doctors weren't sure why. They wanted me to try different formulas and stop breastfeeding and change my diet. And he just stopped intaking as much milk, and his weight stalled for, honestly, I'm not sure, but it's in our charts. And upon reading all of the inserts from the FDA, it specifically says that, stalled weight is one of the side effects. And so I did bring it up with our doctor. And she said that it's probably not the cause, because if you did stop steroids, then usually children will pick up weight immediately once they stop. But it wasn't immediate, but it was pretty quick. After he stopped the steroids, he picked up weight and got back on track again. I don't know if it's, if there is a correlation, but in my mind, that was it. And some of the things that we did for Colby was to just put on a happy face. That was probably some of the hardest parts. Sorry. To just act like everything was normal when we knew it wasn't. To entertain him and jump around and dance and sing and try to make him laugh when you're just dying inside. We did a lot of distraction to distract him from the itch. Anything we could do to keep him entertained and not focused on scratching. Mentally, that was so hard, to act like we're fine. We weren't fine. So mentally, that is those are some of the, I think one of the biggest things that we tried to do is just try to create a normal environment for him. I mean, I remember telling him that life isn't supposed to be like this. He's been through this since he was 1 month old, and that was his introduction to life. And I just remember telling him, life is not like this. Life gets better. It's gonna get better. And it has. Yeah, and it has gotten better, but it has gotten better. But I just remember saying, Colby, life isn't like this. I know that this is your introduction to the world, but there's so much more, and he was just a baby, he didn't know what was going on. So mentally was a huge part, I think, in TSW. It's hard because you're battling two fights. You have a physical condition, and so much of it is emotional and a mental battle for your life. And you're fighting on both fronts 24/7. And we had to carry that mental burden for him. And, the physical part of it, he had to do that. And so physically, what our method was to try to give his body, nutrition and supplements, like everything that his body needed to stay strong to keep up that fight. We had to do a lot of restriction. He spent a lot of his life, just in a straitjacket. Everywhere we went, he was in mittens, and then in a swaddle, and then another swaddle, and we put him in a carrier, and we just hang on to him and bounce him around and distract him and try to play. He slept that way. I mean, his physical mobility was restricted for a lot. He didn't crawl. He missed milestones physically. He didn't live a normal life. Yeah. I think doctors push back because they really want to help. It's Steroids have been in their arsenal for a really long time, and to even try to think that what you have been prescribing for so long as your go-to drug, it's just been their only tool in their tool bag for such a long time. That's really hard to square, right? That potentially something that you have been prescribing has been harming people in a very, very difficult, traumatic way. That's really hard to swallow. Doctors, I believe, really are there to help. They're in that profession because they want to help patients. The industry has also become very, very transactional. It's not a very holistic experience. It's tell me your symptom, and this is the drug that we have to fix it. So I think there's a lot less time being spent with patients, and there's not a whole lot of conversation about other natural holistic options. So they're kind of backed into a corner, and it is hard to see your way out of it. I think with that conversation with Hill Dermaceuticals, first off, she really questioned why I was reporting. I thought that the process would be more like, okay, you've had this situation, so let's record it and take note of it. The conversation was, why are you reporting it now? I don't really believe you that you've had this experience because our drugs are so safe. And it could have been a number of other things. It could have been one of the other drugs that you were using, one of the other steroids. How do you know it was our steroid? How do you know it just wasn't the eczema getting better on its own, not because you stopped steroids? So there was a lot of pushback to taking my complaint. Yeah, so there is a loophole. A lot of people cite that these drugs are safe because we haven't had any complaints, but we're giving the complaints and you're not taking them. So, yeah. When I found out that there were steroids in the anti-fungal, I was shocked. I it was an extreme oversight. I think, I was trying so hard to avoid steroids, and here I was putting this drug on that I specifically was trying to avoid. I was asking for a non-steroid or alternative, trying an antifungal, and in the end, I still found steroids in it in the end. They're so ubiquitous. Steroids are in everything, and it's so easy to be using them and not even know. Our pediatrician prescribed the antifungal, but I think to me, what that speaks of is just how casually these drugs are given. It was, they say, maybe there was a mix-up where the doctor prescribed it, but then when I spoke to the aide on the phone, the aide explained that she's going to prescribe me an anti-fungal. So it was like a game of telephone. Something got mixed up and I wasn't given all of the information potentially. But I think it does just show that there is this carelessness and casualness to the way that steroids are given to people. The general idea is that steroids are so safe that none of these conversations need to be had. What I wish to tell other caregivers is that TSW is not forever, that there is an end to it. It's not a life sentence. Sometimes, the days, they just go on forever and it feels like you're just never, ever going to get out of this. There's no light at the end of the tunnel when you're going through TSW. But I am on the other side, and I know that there is an end. One of them is just being on my hands and knees and praying and just begging for mercy. I remember like my son being in his crib, just like an infant, and there was like nothing I could do to help him. I couldn't turn to the doctors. I couldn't take him to the emergency room. I knew like something was just wrong. Something was really, really bad, and there was nothing I could do. And all I could do was I begged and I cried and I begged for mercy. And it's the whole experience is so traumatic. Watching your child being tortured 24/7 by this invisible force. And that's all I can describe it as. Like hell on earth. I don't, watching your child being tortured 24/7 with no relief. I don't know what's worse than that. It was awful. I wish people understood that skin conditions come with so much more than just a rash. There's an emotional burden. There's the whole routine of it all, trying to manage the skin and how just restricted you feel. Like you just don't live life as free. It's a major burden on the person with the skin condition and all the people around them. It's not easy. Yeah. Yeah, there is a social aspect to skin. And as a new mom, I can speak to that because, when you see pictures of babies, they look perfect, and as a new mom, I thought my baby had to be perfect. And so when he had a rash, I brought it up as a concern. Had I known that, things were totally normal and had that been the response from doctors, is that, you know, it takes patience. You have to just be patient. Babies go through those types of things. And I think that if we showed more photos of babies that with skin things, babies go through so many skin things. And if that was more normalized, then we wouldn't be so anxious to try to jump for a quick fix. Like dermatologists, like you go to dermatologists and they have all these other cosmetic, a big part of their practice is the cosmetic side of it. Yeah, I mean, it's like all about how you look and, oh, I have something to make that look better, and it's all on the surface. Yeah. kids are a blank slate. You know, like adults that have TSW, there are so many like variables and things, but with children, they all start off very similar. So I feel like that they are a good subset to study. You know, I've noticed that they follow a similar pathology and healing patterns and symptoms or seem to be a lot more predictable in my experience. You know, they don't have a long medical history and all these other drugs that might have, you know, complications and things. And their immune systems are getting stronger over time versus, you know, people that are older. So they have really the best shot of overcoming TSW. And if we can just take a step back and let their bodies do what they're meant to do, that they really have a chance of living a normal drug-free life. I'm stronger because of TSW.